Greetings and salutations. You are listening to the Into the North podcast, where we take a look at the competitive side of the Commander format, also known as CEDH. I am one of your hosts, Reed, aka Sick Robot, and today I'm joined by my co-host, Morgan, aka Spleenface.
How's it going, everyone?
And special guest and Tier1Con champ, Ken Baumann.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So, as you might have guessed, in this episode, we're going to be covering just the entire Tier1Con 2022 experience. But before we get into that, is there anything else that you guys have actually been up to since that? Anything interesting?
Not a whole lot on my end. Mostly just, coming back, getting settled in.
Oh, yeah.
And, just getting back into the grind.
Yeah, same. Just getting back into the groove, work picked up, and then trying to get back into the daily writing routine. But it's been good. It's been a good adjustment.
Good stuff. I actually want to get a quick question in here before we go into the topic. How long did it take you guys to unpack after getting back?
I'm a freak who unpacks the second.
Good
I get
for
back.
you. Good for you. It took me a good few days.
Yeah, understandably.
Basically,
that's a lot of stuff.
I unpack all the non-clothing stuff more or less immediately, and then I unpack the clothes when I have to do laundry.
Yep.
Yeah, smart. Yeah.
Checks out.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, we're not going to spend too much time on this, but I did in fact take down the MLC from the last time that we recorded /Tier1Con, so
yeah,
happy about that one. But that's not what this episode's about. If you want to hear anything about that, I actually did a podcast recording with Callahan on the Mind Sculptors, sort of talking about the run and all that stuff. So if you're interested in that, go over to that one. I'm not sure that we're ever actually going to do a full episode on it. So yeah, if you want that content, go do that thing. But for now,
it's a good interview.
Yeah. Thank you. We're gonna stay focused on Tier1Con, except for doing housekeeping real quick. For housekeeping, we have two new patrons. We have Daniel B.
And Zach W.
And thanks to both of you guys. Again, couldn't do it without our patrons. And there is always, as always, some really cool stuff coming down the pipe directly relating to patronage. So yeah, keep your eyes open for that. And also thanks. We'll do new developments as well. By the time this episode comes out, it is probably going to be the weekend of Punt City, but we are going to be there, myself, Morgan, and Lyndon. So if you're there and for some reason you're a patron who's listening to this on the Friday and is also going to Punt City and somehow also didn't know that we were going to be there, it's your lucky day, because we're going to see you probably tomorrow or the day after. So yeah, if you are at Punt City and somehow you're listening to this before the event, come find us, hang out. It's going to be a good time. Otherwise, I'm sure we'll have some amount of a breakdown. I guess depending on how well we did or not. If we both scrubbed out, maybe we won't mention it ever again, but we'll see. And the weekend after Punt City, there is actually going to be the Cash Cards Unlimited event. This is the event being put on by Cassius Marsh and his LGS Cash Cards. I believe... Ooh, I don't want to get the sponsor. Actually, I don't know what the sponsor is, but it's is it...
What, Frankincense?
There's a direct... Oh, I thought there was a direct crypto sponsor.
I mean, they're playing at Frankincense. I think that they've got like 3 or 4 sponsors.
Gotcha. Okay.
Like Ludex, Troll and Toad, a bunch, and like a couple others.
Yeah,
I think.
Okay. Cool.
Maybe.
So Cash Cards Unlimited, it's gonna be a hot one. I'm not sure that there are gonna be tickets by the time this episode comes out, but there is in fact a Black Lotus plus some on the line. So if you're interested in that, you should definitely go check that one out. I think it's going to be a hot one. Unfortunately, I don't think any of the Into the North is getting over down there. It is in California. Ken, I believe you're going.
I will be going. Yep, I'll be attending the circus.
So good luck. You might... There's a very real chance that you could catapult yourself into, just all-times earnings leader for CDH on a scale that really isn't achievable by anybody else if you win this one, so...
Oh, God. Yeah, that would be something.
Cool. So that is our new developments. And yeah, I think we're just going to get into the main topic right now. So we are going to be talking about Tier1Con 2022. It was a great time, good tournament. Ken did in fact take it all down, and in fact, before we get into the topic proper. Ken, do you want to just give us a full introduction?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Ken Baumann. I play a bunch of Magic. I'm a Magic nerd. I run the YouTube channel Stacked EDH, and we make videos about Commander primarily, both casual and competitive. I run, or rather, I publish and am part of the team at cdh.guide, which is an introductory kind of hoping to be a one-stop shop for folks who are curious about CDH, learning about both the metagame and the mindset. We got a lot of data there and statistics, which is fun to poke around. So even if you're a well-enfranchised CDH player, hopefully it's a useful resource for you. And then I maintain the Krark Discord. It's called the Thumbless. And I also keep up 3 primers for 3 CDH Krark lists: Krark Sakshima, Krark Timna, and Krark Thrasios. And then outside the world of Magic, I'm a writer, and you can find information about my books at kenbauman.com. Currently, I'm working on a fantasy novel, which I successfully ran a Kickstarter for. So that's my day-to-day work. So it's pretty fun. But yeah, that's me. That's the spiel.
Nice. And obviously, we're going to hear more about Ken as we talk about this episode.
Yes.
But, yeah, definitely go check him out. Go do all those things. Also, great personal branding, having the first name, last name .com is
Oh gosh, yeah, I did that. God, when I think I was like 14 when I got that website. I was like, why not,
That's
right? And that was a good decision.
Cool. So I think we're just gonna hop in. I think because there's a lot to get through here. And it's gonna be a pretty action-packed hour-ish and a half. We'll see. But yeah, so I think we'll immediately get into it, and probably starting at the beginning, as one does, and then talk about sort of everything leading up to the event. There are a couple of points here that I definitely want to touch on, but I think first we'll get through just all the Magic-related stuff in terms of prepping for the event, obviously. So doing deck tuning, play testing, I guess like shaping the way that you play the deck, maybe tuning ball against the event. Like meta-analysis, that kind of stuff. But I guess let's step through it one point at a time. So I guess we'll talk about sort of going in, what you sort of figured the meta was going to be like, and then I'm assuming that sort of informs a lot of the decisions around how you built the deck going into the event.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'll reveal my naivete or my irresponsibility here, but or hopefully both. Hopefully I can reveal both for your entertainment and edification. So I asked a couple of friends who are more familiar with that meta, hey, what should I expect? You know, I really, my primary question was, how stacks heavy is the meta? You know, what proportion of decks in the tournament do you think are going to be stacks decks? And because I think that's ultimately Krark Sakshima's toughest matchup, particularly Winota. And so I was, curious about that, but I just sort of asked some general questions, like, hey, is this like East Coast, New York, like turbo, all gas, no brakes, or people playing mid-range? Do you find that people kind of play more responsibly, or are they a little bit fast and loose? Just sort of general, kind of getting the boundaries of the event in my head. And in terms of deck selection, I mean, my job was really easy because I had a couple points to prove. So I was like, and that's why I made the hopefully funny Blue Farm video where I, cop to finally capitulating to the wisdom of the, the CDH pros and being like, I'm just going to play the best deck and, like, et cetera, et cetera. And then I'm like, no, I'll just play the deck I like. I'll play Krark Sakshima. And, so, I wanted to get a sense of sort of what I was going to face, but I already knew what I was going to do with the deck in advance of the event because I'd been planning this for a few months. So after the Marquesa 2022 tournament report, in which, Krark was like, oh, Krark's a big problem, and if you play Krark, we're going to be watching you, and you better be good, or you suck and we'll kick you out, that kind of stuff. I decided to pivot the deck away from its commander centricity as much as possible, given the colors, which, is a little tough, and is it, but I did what I could. And so I made a pretty significant amount of changes to the list, sort of rebuilt it from the ground up after that tournament report, in the hopes that people who would find the deck and play it would feel a little less affected by that additional heat and scrutiny that the deck was drawing at the time. And the deck was worse. Yeah, I mean, I'll just say it. Like, it was worse when it relied less on its command zone because, we're not in 4+ colors, so command zone centricity into colors really is just sort of like the necessary evil in my eyes.
Yeah, this is sort of where the power comes from if you're cutting colors, right?
Exactly. And so leaning away from that felt kind of awkward, but, I did it for a couple reasons. One was to help players again who found the deck, and two was just to sort of see what the deck could support. If in other words, if it could kind of hang in a less commander-centric structure.
Right.
And I pretty quickly came to the conclusion that, like, no, this is worse. Like, this is just definitively worse. And so I had planned, right as I came home from the tournament, sort of regardless of how I did, I was going to update the primer publicly to reflect the changes that I had made privately, and I'd shared those changes with folks in the Kark Discord as well before the event. But basically, I changed the deck back and sort of brought it home more or less to its pre-Marquesa 2022 structure with some lessons learned from the post-Marquesa list. And I wanted to make sure that the deck felt, at least for me for the tournament, very low to the ground. With, just steady low mana value interaction, flexible redundancies in terms of interaction. So, yes, I'm running Stern Dismissal for an instant speed bounce stuff, but hey, I hate that Archon that says don't cast instants, so let's also play Void Snare because that's a 1 mana bounce spell. Just trying to make sure that all my bases were covered and that there were a few redundancies in every category of interaction that I really found super important, have found super important for the list to have. And then in terms of like the engine, I think that was really where I didn't have to think, because the deck's engine is sort of pretty established at this point, and has changed minimally over the last, I'd say, 6 months. And so I just kind of threw all that together and made a couple of sort of decisions that felt like personal preference for a tournament environment. Like, for instance, this is a good example, I think. I cut Invoke Calamity, which people, were very, very happy with, but I was like, I don't want to resolve that in a 75-minute timed round, so I'm going to just stick with Finale Promise and see where that takes me. Just some stuff like that to try to be a little bit more friendly for time. And then, so I was on that version of the list about about a month, I'd say, a month and a half before flying out to Copenhagen, and just was playing it regularly, as much as I could locally and with folks online.
Yeah, definitely.
But it wasn't, I didn't have to, that was the sort of nice thing about playing the quote unquote pet deck, is like I didn't have to playtest too much because,
right.
I already run the deck into bad matchups all the time locally. And so I was really used to that. And then, if I was like, okay, if I'm going to see some turbo and some mid-range, I feel pretty comfortable playing in those pods. So I don't really need to do too much thought work to prepare for that. I feel pretty prepared for that.
So actually,
then that was it.
Yeah, I actually did want to ask though, because it's sort of a constant thing among, I guess, people that play in a lot of tournaments right now, that it seems that the importance of being able to find pods that have the composition that you want to test against is a pretty big thing hard. Recently, and it's pretty difficult to get. So I was actually wondering, like, sort of what your process was for that, or like what your experience has been in terms of trying to, like, do you actively try to assemble pods that you think that you want to test against to test certain matchups? Do you just tend to try to walk into certain metas and just hope that the metas have the decks that you're looking for in there, or sort of what around that? What's the ideas for you? What's the process?
Well, I'm a little bit lucky in that both the folks I play with online and the folks locally have a pretty wide variety of decks. And so generally my practice, playing locally, which is where I sort of get the most games in, I'd say, I just trust that the wandering attention spans of my friends would sort of vary up the pod composition frequently enough to kind of reflect different kinds of metas. And that wound up being the case. I play with Mab the Queen, who's on Twitter, and she's got a bajillion CDH lists.
Right.
And so, I'm always Mab is always available to like pull out a kind of deck where I'd be like, hey, do you like play turbo? And then I play against a Winota main, and so I feel like I'm as comfortable against that deck as I can be, which is never comfortable. And then I play against in the local as well, just sort of a pretty dedicated control player, and then there's a few other players who come in and out, and they've got each about 5 or 6 lists as well. So it's good. Like the variety is pretty frequent, but I wouldn't really like show up locally or even play online and say, hey, can you play turbo? Can you play mid-range? And can you play stacks, or something like that? I would just sort of trust that I would luck into that.
Right.
And usually it happened. And similar thing for online. Playing against folks who stream all the time means you get to play against sorta whatever deck that you want to play against. So no, I didn't really design it top down. I just sort of trusted that the variety would be helpful. Playing in a meta that is essentially unknown. I ask questions about it, but you don't know until you show up on the day, I guess.
Yeah. I guess also, Morgan, feel free to hop in for questions as well. But there are actually a couple of additional things that I sort of wanted to dig into in terms of playtesting before the event. So obviously, there wasn't a whole lot in terms of like major overhauls of a list that you're going to make before the event. We said earlier, it's the advantage of having a pet deck and a deck that you have sort of iterated on for a really long time is that the slots tend to be pretty tight, at least to your own personal preference. So I actually did want to ask if you had put any thought into during testing, maybe not if you didn't necessarily want to make changes to the deck that much, or if you weren't like looking to optimize slots that much because you were pretty confident in it. Were you thinking about like tuning your mulligans or play patterns at all to the event during testing?
Well, I mean, I have sort of a couple heuristics for this deck in general that have seemed pretty useful regardless of sort of where I'm sitting down. And so I made sure to try, before the event, I made sure to try to mulligan with more discipline. A little less playing it casually, right? A little less like, okay, this hand looks good and fine, and we're just here to play a handful of games and then go home. But I would try to just, have that discipline that I anticipated I would have, or hoped that I would have at the tournament, while playing locally and online. So in other words, what that looked like for me was, okay, am I going to see a Draneth early? And if so, I need a mulligan to a turn 1 Krark. Or am I going to see an oof or an oof effect? Okay, if I anticipate that I am, I need a mulligan to, removal. And am I playing against a turbo deck? I have to be super disciplined and just hold up interaction and slow roll it a little bit.
Right.
Which are just sort of general rules of thumb that have helped. But beyond, just sort of adhering to those 3 principles more or less, I didn't make mulligan decisions based on anticipating a light stacks, mostly mid-range and turbo meta. Because that's kind of the nice thing about, at least in my mind, that's been the nice thing about playing a very commander-centric, engine-oriented deck, is that you know your matchups pretty well, and so the mulligan heuristics stay pretty uniform based on what you're sitting across. Like, you don't really have to think too deeply about it, because you know what to expect and you know what to anticipate as being disruptive to your primary game plan, and if your primary game plan gets disrupted, then you're probably on the back foot already. And you just need to be prepared to pivot or wait for a chance to redevelop or whatever. But yeah, so I didn't try, and I also wanted to make sure to not try to like big brain myself too much, because this was my first in real life CDH tournament, and so I was like, I need to just be comfortable and confident in my choices, and I just want to trust that I can pilot the deck well, and trust that I know the deck's matchups, and then we'll just play to the best of our ability and see what happens.
Which I think it's a pretty good mindset in general. Just sort of like once you have done all the prep that you reasonably can do for a tournament, just sort of to lock in the mental and just be like, yep, we're just gonna play and we're gonna play well, and whatever we get, we're gonna take and just run with it.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And that, I mean, and regardless of sort of like what is optimal in terms of preparation, I only have so much capacity. Like I want to be a super rigorous thinker in terms of like being prepared and anticipating sort of the correct futures and like modeling it out all accurately, but I'm just not that smart. So, I just sort of like get to a point at which I'm just sort of like, okay, like I know I'm pretty done here, and now I just need to focus on process and focus on what's in front of me. And that's where I rate myself the most highly as a player, is not knowledge and is not being anticipatory of metas and is not like, being the most optimal brewer, but I am very, very confident in my ability to just focus on the situation of the game and not lose focus and sort of play it from start to finish. That was sort of the goal. And to be honest, that was the goal of the tournament. I was not preparing, and this may sound silly, but I was not preparing with the aim to show up and win. I was preparing with the aim to show up, play. Those were the two primary goals. Just show up, just make it and play. And then when playing, play as tightly as I could and make as few mistakes as possible. And then again, kind of trust the process.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I think that's definitely in CDH in particular. I think at a certain point you just kind of have to approach, like you have to understand that some amount of your play is just going to be intuitive. Like in other formats you can try and you could write, say, like a several page guide for like each matchup. And then it's like, okay, here's what you're looking for, here are the kind of cards you want to see, here's what you have to worry about, whatever, and then play from that. But even if you assume that the deck pools were like roughly equally the same size, which they're very not, that means that there's two orders of magnitude more matchups that you have to prepare for in CDH than in, say, Legacy, because in Legacy you have one opponent and in CDH you have three. So like, all right, I'll write my Winota Thrasios Timna Crom matchup guide, and
then also that matchup guide will also include all the permutations of turn orders and how those affect the matchup.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah. Easy peasy, Yeah, exactly. And so I'm a big, what's the word? I'm like a big believer in the reality of variance, right, in CDH. And
no, I had no idea. It's certainly not as if you're known for the guy who flips coins continuously.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, true. And so, I playing, and I also realized about myself sort of years and years ago, before I even picked up CDH, playing it like a big Magic Fest or GP at the time, playing at a GP, like I know the mindset in which I feel like healthy and capable as a competitive player, and it's very specific. And trying to adopt other kinds of competitive mindsets just don't work well with my brain and body setup. And so this mindset, in other words, like be extremely process oriented and extremely focused on what's in front of you, and then just sort of trust your ability going in and trust your ability to pay attention and learn on the fly.
Right.
That's where I feel like, okay, I can compete holistic, like I can sustain as a competitor in that mode. But if I start to be more sort of goal oriented, or if I start to try to feel more sort of masterful in terms of like my knowledge of the event, that I start to fall apart. And I just know this about myself after decades of being competitive in various fields. And so this is where I lived, sort of regardless of whether or not it was right. In general, it's all I can do.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. So I think I think we've probably talked enough about preparation for the actual event. I sort of so it's sort of a question that I sort of wanted to ask because you had talked about it at the event and had sort of alluded to it on Twitter leading up to the event as well. That you had some I mean I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you had some difficulties leading up to especially international travel leading up to this event that I personally found to be like super interesting and a great part of the success story that is the winning of Tier1Con, and I thought
cool.
was worth exposing to a general audience so they had the context for it.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, absolutely. Happy to talk about that. This is all hopefully entertainment, right? These events, they should be fun to watch as even if you're not participating in them. So hopefully this adds to the drama. So a couple things were complicated leading up to the event. The first biggest complication, the most profound complication, was just like my health status. Like I am in like a small percentage of folks for whom COVID is super, super risky because I take an immunosuppressant because I have Crohn's disease, and that's what manages the Crohn's. And so I've had to be pretty vigilant and cautious and like risk averse for the last 2.5 years. And so that was a thing in my mind. I was like, okay, I'll be getting on a plane for the first time in like 2.5 years, and I'll be in airports for the first time and blah, 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 so just sort of preparing myself for that and being ready to just sort of like, okay, what do I need to do to feel like I'm taking care of myself and I'm safe within my control? And then what else, what do I need to just sort of yield about and be like, well, doing what I can, and if I get sick, I get sick, but I'm willing to take that risk. So I had to make those decisions. And then I also booked all my travel and then realized, oh, Ken, your passport's expired. That's pretty cool. And so so I had to deal with the wonderful U.S. Department of State. I say that incredibly facetiously, although they were fine in this respect. I had to, make an appointment for the day before I flew out internationally in a town 6 hours away. So I had to do a 12-hour round-trip drive to and from Denver, show up to the Department of State's little station in Aurora, Colorado, and be like, please help, and then just hope that they would give me the passport the same day. They make no promises, they tell you nothing over the phone. They're just like, we can't tell you anything. Just show up that morning and good luck, And so I did that, and I stayed with some friends, and that was lovely. But yeah, it was 12-hour round trip. Got the passport the same day. Was like, wow, oh my god, like the state worked. Like that's amazing.
That's incredible.
Yeah, exactly. And I was like staring at it, being like, huh, this is surreal. And then drove back home. Slept for like 4 or 5 hours, got up, went to the airport, did the thing. And then the international travel sucked because international travel just sucks and airports are bad and planes are bad. Cool, but, unpleasant experiences. And Heathrow is a horrendous place. God. And please, God, don't fly to or from Heathrow if you can get away with it. And yeah, there was like one point in Heathrow where I was like, I was in a sea. I was in a sea of like... probably 600, 700 people waiting just to get through security, sweaty, tight corridors. I'm like, one of maybe 8% of people in the crowd wearing masks, and I was just like, cool.
Well, if any were going to be the time, this would be it.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, okay, like, well, here we go.
If we survive this one, I think you have pretty good odds.
yeah, exactly. But, so far so good, so that's been good. But yeah, so, made it finally, and then from there, smooth sailing, and like, yes, getting home was also miserable, and there were delays, and it took forever, and I think I spent 56 hours traveling, from like a Thursday to a Monday, on either side of that. It was like 56 hours total, so unpleasant, but... At the end of the day, nothing a good night of sleep or a decent night of sleep and a good dinner can't fix. So I showed up Thursday, took care of myself Thursday night, got decent sleep Friday night, and it was fine. It was great. It was a great trip.
Yeah, awesome. Cool. So I think, actually, I'm going to swap. We have stuff in the doc there. I'm just going to swap the order. There we go. So yeah, I guess let's fast forward to being in Copenhagen, I guess, and
Yeah.
sort of directly before the event. So for the structure, for anybody listening who hasn't looked too deeply into it, so effectively what the event would look like was basically like a bunch of people, at least internationally, showed up on the Thursday, and then Friday evening there was actually a last chance qualifier for a bye in the main event. Which was actually very interesting and was also actually like sort of great just for the fact that you could enter like the list didn't have to be the same between the LCQ and the main event. I'm not sure that you were one of the people who took advantage of that, but it was definitely interesting to sort of get like a sneak preview of the tournament meta for 3 rounds before actually playing the tournament and like having a few hours overnight to sort of rethink some deck choices and stuff. In that time. But just like, I guess like immediately before the LCQ or the main event, Eddie, did you end up doing any last minute swaps or / do you wish that you would have done any last minute swaps?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Within the first like couple rounds of the LCQ, I was like, man, I really miss In the Festivities. I didn't anticipate how what's the word? I didn't anticipate how dork heavy like the meta was going to be, and I probably should have, right? Because I got told, hey, it's a lot of mid range, so I should have been like, oh well, hey, let's kill some dorks. But I missed it. There are a couple games where I was like, oh god, this would be so good right now.
Yeah. I think I remember. Were we playing in like the hotel bar or something, or was it? Yeah. Yeah, and I was like, oh, yeah, there's definitely an end the festivities coming down the pipe. And you're like, nope, not in the deck. And I was like, wait, seriously?
Yeah, exactly. And I was like, oh, shit. So I missed that card. But for the most part, otherwise, I felt pretty good. So that was really the only thing that I missed. And given the opportunity, I can't, in other words, if I had a copy of the card, which I don't know. It might have been hard to find because it is literally just a common.
Just bulk chaff.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if I would have made a cut because I just felt so confident and thoughtful about every slot that I and cuts always are, as they are for all of us, I'm sure, pretty excruciating. And
actually, I'm gonna hop in right there because. Morgan has had the exact same experience with me. I love cutting cards.
Wow.
I absolutely love paring decks down to like 90, 95 cards. The issue for me is finding the replacements.
Yes. Yeah, that makes sense. So
I think it's interesting, like totally opposite thought processes for that. Yeah.
Wow.
Because like even like in Thrastimna, where you would assume that cuts get pretty hard after a while in terms of like it is just a ball of card quality, and like as soon as you want to add any card in, it's like, well, these are all spoken for. Like this is 98 slots of just like good stuff. For me, I take so much pleasure in like looking at those decks and being like, I think these 5 cards are cuttable. I don't think you could actually I don't think you actually need a Veil of Summer in this spot. I think you could probably cut these 2 tutors. This removal spell sort of sucks here, and then the issue is like finding the backfill for it.
Yes, that's amazing though. I mean, and that's probably an attitude that I need to try to adopt because, and I do think it is. I mean, it is different, although maybe it isn't so different with like a narrow color restricted deck because, I don't know, like card evaluation is always both very, very simple for various Kark decks and complicated from the perspective of being like, okay, where do we want to try to increase overlaps? Where how is this redundant with what other effects, and how can we benefit from that redundancy? And like, is the alternate, which maybe is a little bit better in a vacuum, is that going to be more relevant, etc. But
there's just like so many interlocking pieces in Kark, I think, that are like the big one in terms of like everything in the deck sort of touches all the other pieces in the deck in like ways that aren't immediately apparent a lot of the time. Or like the densities of certain effects like make engines work, and you might not have thought. I'm sure you have thought a lot about about this, but like for the average person, like you might not have thought about like the actual like interaction of like 20 of these slots and how they interact with the rest of the deck, which can make like cuts sort of weird and additions sort of weird.
Exactly. And, you know, I've tried to be very, very experimental with the list and, you know, rebuild it a few times just to see what happens. But sort of we wind up coalescing around the same spot, you know, the community does. And I think that the deck, I mean, God, this is... Maybe a tweet could explain my the like forced ideology of this deck is like, you know, I was like, okay, those are some cool rares and mythics that you got there in the new set, Watsy. Okay, now finger guns, show me the 1 mana value instants and sorceries. Exactly. Like that's all, and I know that that's right. That's sort of generally a CDH mindset of being like, okay, show me the efficient stuff, you know, and then we'll look at that and evaluate that, but the strictures with which I have to evaluate cards for this deck are really, really tight, you know, because I have to be like, yes, you know, people look at the list frequently who aren't super familiar with it, and they, you know, they ask good questions. They're like, hey, why no force negation? Why no this? Why no that? And then you have to go, well, you know, just imagine owning a stacks piece and controlling it. Now cast that card. What happens? Yeah. You know, and being like having to think about the early stage of the engine as this sort of big gate, this threshold over which, through or over which things need to pass in order to be efficient. And that's weird. That's weird.
Yeah.
But I'd say most decks don't have to deal with that kind of that band, you know.
Yeah.
So thinking about cards is strange for this deck. So but maybe I think I do need to have a more sort of gleeful attitude towards cuts and swaps, because it's just like, God, it's just so painful to me. It never feels maybe difficult, but it feels painful. It's like, you know, killing my darlings or
play all
whatever.
The cards, right? So when you can't play
I want to, and this is why I'm a terrible CDH player from the perspective of mulligans, because I see hands and I'm like, these cards are all great.
I want to cast these cards. Yeah, let's cast these cards. And then you're 3 turns and you're like, wait, these cards don't do the thing that I want them to do.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, well, you have to not lose in order to cast spells, so maybe not lose first. But yeah, so I don't know if that was helpful or gobbledygook or whatever, if that was nonsense.
It's great.
But
I think it's a great insight, especially for our listeners as well.
Okay, cool.
Morgan, do you have any questions burning hole in your pocket about pre-event stuff, or just like immediately before the event?
I mean, so I guess it's you know, you said you were talking about and the festivities. Was the meta like what you were expecting? Like, I get that you didn't wind up making any swaps, and honestly, that's probably like a good policy.
Yep.
we're definitely bad about that. We'll like jam a half dozen games the night before an event and then be like, yeah, we'll make like, you know, 1 or 2 swaps based on that information, and like sometimes we're right, sometimes we're not right. I think Reed was very happy with his wing crafter. I wound up cutting mine. Maybe I shouldn't have done that. But
mine, I was happy about it in so much as like it served the function that I wanted it to, but I still described it multiple times on day 2 as an embarrassing slot, and I'm pretty sure the rest of the table agreed. Actually, when me and River were sitting down for the top 16 game, I won't jump too far ahead, but when we were sitting down for the top 16 game, we both realized that we were like, so... Because it was open deck lists, obviously. So like everybody in the top 16 was just like looking over deck lists for the rest of the pod before the games.
Yep.
And we both basically asked each other like, so did you see the one? And we were yeah, I'm pretty sure I know what you're talking about.
Wait, what was Rivers?
I think his was I'm forgetting it now. It was what was it? I think it was one of the creatures. I'd have to go look at the list. I can tell you what it was as soon as I found the list, but yeah, totally forget. But mine was certainly the wing crafter that he was just like, yeah, if the rest of the table hasn't seen that, that's the embarrassing one.
Well, yeah. So anyways, I guess like the question I was going to ask was basically like, even if you didn't make any card swaps, did you make any other adjustments like based on the information you got from the day before, where you're like, okay, I'm going to be mulliganing more aggressively for, a bounce spell because I think there's going to be a lot of stacks pieces or anything like that? Or was it more or less you went, yep, the play patterns that I was expecting to have to use are going to be successful?
Yeah. I mean, I think I made 2 changes, and also like staying up with Alan, a mental misplay, and like chatting after the LCQ was also very useful in this respect. But the first adjustment I made was just sort of the attitude, like an attitude adjustment. I sort of just felt comfortable after that LCQ, in which I went 0 and 3, by the way. So it's not like I did well, but I felt really comfortable with my knowledge about what I was gonna sit across. So like I went in sort of being like, okay, what surprising commanders am I gonna see, or what cards are gonna take me by surprise? And having worked on the CDH or having worked on CDH guide, I'd like to think that I'm not gonna be surprised that often. And that, at least in those 3 games, I wasn't. And I was very happy about that, right? Like, the winning lines, I understood, I anticipated, the card choices made sense. I never felt like, oh God, like I have to remind myself, like, how does this deck win? I just felt like, okay, I know, at least right now, tonight, right? Like after the LCQ, I'm going to sleep relatively peacefully. I'm not going to be tossing and turning, being like, oh God, what unknown is swirling around out there. So that was the first adjustment. The second adjustment was, I don't know if I was confident enough to say that I anticipated this, but I'll just say that I was curious about how much fishes and Ristics would be fed.
Right.
And I was like, well, we'll see. Maybe the turbo player will feed it. Maybe the mid-range won't. And, the common patterns will prevail. And I think I saw in those first 3 games enough evidence to just go like, oh, people are very careful players. Most of my opponents were pretty damn careful.
Right.
But we're not paying for Ristic all the time. And we're certainly feeding fishes. And so I was like, okay, this is good. This is going to make those hands seem even more keepable, And if I'm looking at a hand where it's like 1 piece of acceleration, like a modest piece of acceleration, 3 lands and a Ristic, that might just get there more than I normally think it would,
right?
And so that was really nice to see. And so that was, I'd say, the second adjustment. And otherwise, no, other than being like, oh, in the festivities, which, to be honest, that was just I would say that was probably just an oversight, Like, I thought, like, oh, mid-range, sure. But I didn't then go, well, dorks, duh,
Right, yeah.
So there was just a blind spot. But I think it wound up working out okay. All's well that ends well, I suppose. But in the future... And if I anticipate mid-range, I think that cards like that or considerations like that, I'll actually try to sit with those thoughts a little bit longer and be like, okay, but now what? Like, I have the thought, but now what do I need to do?
Well, I mean, if you win, then every card choice you made was objectively correct.
It's correct.
Yeah, exactly.
That's 100% correct. That's right. Yeah, no mistakes. Perfect play. Yeah, that's right.
I feel like people often forget. There's like the Star Trek. It's possible to commit no errors and yet still lose. And it feels like a corollary of that is that it's also possible to commit errors and still win. And I feel like people forget that a lot.
Yep. Exactly. Yes. And in a 4-player free-for-all singleton format, like, that is probably going to happen a lot more often than you would like if you are a control freak like me,
Yeah. So it's interesting that you you mentioned the LCQ people were not careful about Ristic study and fish. I had a real rough game in one of my LCQ games where 2 people tried to make bad win attempts in a row, feeding a Ristic study the whole time, and then passed to me after both of them didn't get there. They went up passing to me with literally 2 mana and a Thrasios in play. And being like, all right, so it's your job to stop the Rog Silas player who has 15 cards in hand. I was like,
yeah, good luck.
Sure. Yeah, I got you. Don't worry about it.
I got it.
Yeah, I got 15 cards in my hand, and they're all force of will. Well, I'm ready.
Yeah. Including waiting for 40 minutes for a Gitrog player to try and clean up Sculpt with no crop rotation in his deck.
No,
But
no mana open.
No.
Yeah, it was a little rough. But but yeah, like I definitely I think that's one of those things that like it's impossible to predict and is hugely variable pod to pod, where like I had a pod where someone played a Ristic study and like everyone was like, all right, so we're all like gonna be chill about this, right? And then like I had other pods where someone played it and then the next person just immediately was like, yeah, draw 3 cards, and I was like,
Oh
okay.
boy. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a thing. And it's definitely like I think it's one of the things that has, even within a meta, can have extremely high variance from one pilot to the next, one deck to the next, and is hard to get like a general shape on. So I'm curious, did on the next day, like on the actual tournament, were people pretty aggressively feeding, or like was that your experience?
Well, I mean, depends on what people means. I definitely did in a game. No, I played it pretty safely, and I would say that there were a couple games where, there were 2 games. One in which I was the perpetrator. I absolutely, just fed all the cards in the world to the fish player going for it. I did not anticipate that the other Karksakshima player, who had mulled to 4, would have 3 pieces of interaction in their hand when I went for it. So that just sometimes happens, and one of which was Mindbreak Trap, so rest in peace to my whole life. So I did that, and then also there was a game in which a Joyra player was in seat 1. Blue Farm plays Aristic, pass. Timina Jessica sets up, just mana. And then I play Aristic and pass. And both the Blue Farm player and I were just sort of smiling and sitting back and waiting. And yeah, indeed, it happened. We both got fed like crazy, and then the Kark engine beat the Blue Farm engine in terms of the control game. And so, I think that those play patterns are pretty common, where somebody just feels like, well, I'm in too deep now, and like the sunk cost fallacy is just like ringing out in the sky as they just continue to dig and dig. But otherwise, I'd say that Ristics and fishes that I saw throughout the whole tournament, evaluated broadly, they all drew a good to like a modest to good amount of cards on average, and nobody played super conservatively against them. Like, that's sort of what I expected, to be honest, but nobody felt like, oh, I will never feed this. Like, in principle, like, no, let's unite, let's never feed it. I never saw that happen, which would surprise me a little bit.
One of the games I played of fish, everyone was like pretty good about feeding it until there was a 6 counterspell war over a rolling earthquake.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
just sitting there,
moments like that, it's like it all just goes to hell.
Drawing cards back and forth, as it wasn't even the rolling earthquake. It wasn't even the person who cast the rolling earthquake who was trying to protect it. It was Najila was trying to counter it, and like it was Elsha cast it. Najila was trying to counter it. Blue Farm was trying to protect it because they literally didn't have creatures in play. And I'm just sitting there. I have a bunch of creatures in play. I don't want it to resolve, but I'm like, I'm gonna let you guys just do your thing. And then at the end, I was like, all right, I'll spend 1 counter spell from the 7 cards that I just drew, and
my God,
and I'll stop this.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, so I mean, I don't know. Maybe the expectation for Ristics and fishes to be like thoroughly and consistently respected is like just against human nature in 2022 or 2023 eventually.
Yeah,
maybe that's just the case. But
there's also an element of just there's it. I won't say it's sort of a weird. It's weird to describe, but the average level of responsibility in tournament pods is pretty high, but the average number of people in a given pod that are not going to be responsible is also higher, if that makes any sense.
Sure.
Like, generally, yeah. Like, so, generally, people's play patterns are relatively responsible in tournament compared to how they would regularly play CDH
Yep.
stuff, but you're also very likely to have at least one person in a pod that is not going to be responsible about that type of stuff.
Yep.
So
Yep.
it's sort of like a
And
different
that- yep.
texture compared to like playtesting pods and stuff in that way, or just
Yeah.
stream pods or whatever.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, I just felt very lucky, #blessed, whatever, to just be playing blue. Love to play blue, and it turns out that it certainly helped.
Yeah, there's actually something we won't get too deep into this, I guess, but there's definitely something to be said, especially I sort of been sitting on this. Not really theory, because I know it's exactly how I pick decks and how Morgan picks decks in general.
Yeah.
But the idea of like when you're playing decks for a tournament, if you are confident in your own skills as a player a lot of the time, then you'll tend to gravitate towards decks with higher player agency. Read blue.
Yeah. Yep.
So, and especially blue decks that actually have game going into mid game and potentially long game as well.
Yep.
And I'm assuming that's a large part as well of like why you would play Krark Sakashima over, say, like Krark Timma, where
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, it just you have just blue gives you so much player agency, and it gives you like a larger lever to be able to leverage your player skill when playing
Yes.
a deck.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I am not a, what's the word? Like, I shot my shot and I'm sort of comfortable with the consequences player in terms of deck patterns.
Right.
And I always want to be able to do something, and that is the archetypal blue psychology, and it sure is true for me. And also, too, just like, I don't think that we can say too much conclusively about
certainly not.
tournament results. Yeah, about tournament results and what they say about decks and blah, blah, blah. But I do think we are nearing being able to say conclusively that if you don't play blue, you are absolutely playing on hard mode from the perspective of tournament CDH.
Well,
it's
it's weird because it's maybe not even necessarily hard mode. Like I see where you're coming from with it, but it's sort of just like you just sort of like giving up all of your like you're sort of like giving up a bunch of the gameplay like percentage points for mulligan percentage points, it feels like.
Yes. Yep.
Where it's just like,
yep.
All right, well, we're just gonna try to go hit good hands and then try to kill people.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a nightmare for me. I hate mulliganing. I like every card I draw. That's why I play them.
I mean, that's why do you think we play blue dork decks, right? You're just like, yeah, this hand has 2 lands, a dork, and a Timid in the command zone. Sure, fine, we'll jam it.
Exactly. Yep.
Cool. So I guess before we move on from the LCQ, were there any like other memorable moments that you wanted to talk about, or do you think we're good to move on to the good stuff?
Well, I mean, maybe this is a moment from the LCQ that I thought was just fun and silly and might be sort of a good advertisement for the deck. There was just a moment in which I'd get probe somebody, and I knew that they had a Calling the Weak, and they had a Roger and a Rograk, and I had an offer you can't refuse, and I had a Pact of Negation, and we needed an out. Table collectively needed an out,
right.
And Pact and offer weren't it, and it was my turn, it was main phase, and I was like, okay, look, I need you to put a Calling the Weak on the stack so that I can Pact it, copy it with Krark. I just had 1 Krark trigger at the time. And then cast offer, tapping out to do so, cast offer, win the flip. If I lose the flip, the turn just ends and we lose. Win the flip, put 2 offer copies on the stack, 1 each, targeting each Pact, make 4 treasures, and then I got to gamble into the answer.
Jesus.
Extremely convoluted and stupid, but I managed to convince the player to Calling the Weak the Roger, and I gave it a shot, and everything worked up until the point where gamble needed to resolve, and then I spent 4 treasures to fail to gamble 4 times in a row. But so that is either a great advertisement for the deck and its silliness, or a great advertisement for playing other decks, which you don't need to do such dumb stuff that blows up in your face about.
Yeah, you don't need to try to resolve a gamble 4 times, and even
4
if it does
times,
resolve,
exactly.
not discard the card that you do before. Not have it be Red and Tomb.
Yes, exactly. So that was funny, and I'll just remember that for a little while. It was just sort of a convoluted out, and I was proud of myself for seeing it, and then very, very bemused amused at the fact that Kark said, "Nah, don't quit trying to be smart, kid." And yeah, but no, I mean the games were good, and I felt very lucky, like you'd said earlier, to have gotten a free taste, a free preview of the tournament to come. I was like, oh, this is amazing. Like, yeah, there's no downside to playing these games, it's all upside. So that felt so good.
Yeah, I will say before we move on, I keep tacking on things before we move on, but truly just before we move on, I think the LCQ is actually like a great thing to have for larger tournaments. I actually super appreciate the ability, if you're there a bit early, to go play some rounds of like actual tournament CEDH the day before.
Yes.
And getting like a view of the meta, and I feel like it's also, I mean, like joking will probably yell at me and tell me that it's not the case, but I feel like it's you just because you're rewarding with buys rather than actual prize support, it feels like you actually maybe helps increase the profit margins for tournament organizers, which is desperately needed. You just charge entrance fee for the LCQ, which people are going to pay to play in, and then you just you get like an extra day of tournament with an extra entry fee, right? Without having to actually, you just have to run it. Which I mean, you have to run it, yes, and set it up and all that stuff, but
yeah, sure. There were, I mean, like if you get, I don't know, 30 players in your LCQ at $20 a pop, and you already have your venue, then like I'm pretty sure you can run a. You have to pay some people for their time, but I don't think it would be that much. Yeah, that was definitely, like, that was a good event. I mean, I think that there is sort of an argument essentially that people who can show up early, or can show up the day ahead, or I mean, can obviously, like, it was $20 here, so probably anyone who's attending the main event can afford to enter it, but I guess there's an argument that maybe buys aren't the best, like having a bunch of people with earned buys aren't like the best for a tournament structure. And like I get why they did them, like they did them last year because they had like their online events, which was basically how they like built the community and built the hype for the main event. Was they had these online qualifiers that they gave out buys at, but I could see an argument that we don't want buys to be like a regular part of tournament structure.
Right. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's certainly from the perspective of like drama and entertainment, it's not an ideal thing. In particular, if you're like, okay, the more pairings, the more pods, and particularly with players who are skillful enough to earn buys, the more that, the more good media we could produce. Like from that perspective too, it's kind of tough. Like, the six and spleens of the world should be playing because that is good entertainment.
Well,
right?
The trick is you give them a buy and then you get them to commentate round one.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's yep. That's the tit for tat for sure. Oh, before I forgot too, before we move on, I did want to mention one play that I thought was really beautiful. Yeah. And deserves its sort of moment in the sun at the LCQ. And I'll just do it concisely. So. It was that same game, right? And a player who seemed very, very stuck and in a very difficult position. They were on very little mana. They had an Aether Vial, which was, that was scary because they were playing Timno Thrasios Druid.
Oh, yeah.
And so they had the Aether Vial, and it was on 2. And so everybody's like, well, this isn't good, or it's going to tick up to 2 in their upkeep.
Yeah.
And they ticked it up. They Veiled a Summer. They consulted. They consulted for Thoracle, which they had scryed to the bottom during their mulligans, and they hadn't cracked a fetch and done anything. Picked it up, Aether Vialed it down, boom. And it was just gorgeous. I was like, that was so elegant. And just made me go like, wow, lists that can play Aether Vial are cool. What a cool card that is.
Full agreement in like literally everything that player was doing, because that's just everything that I love about the rest of him now.
It was so good.
Those are legitimately two of my favorite play patterns in Thrastemna. Is the I'm card limited and I need to be able to win with just this consult, so I'm gonna dig with Thrasios to put a Thoracle on the bottom. I absolutely love that line, and also it's just having an Aether Vial in play is I commend that person because I've never been brave enough to bring Aether Vial to a tournament, but I absolutely love the card, and I love that somebody brought it.
Yeah. It is such a cool effect, and it feels like, obviously it's not underexplored in Magic's history, but it certainly feels underexplored in CDH, and so I really like.
There's only one error that was made, which is you have to activate the Aether Vial hold priority console.
Cast the console,
yeah, that's true.
More style points, yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's the double kickflip, but yeah, so that was cool. But that was just another player's moments. I tried it when I think back to tournament results, and Reed, I learned this from you too. Like, it's good to shout out those moments in which somebody blows you out spectacularly, because that is just part of the fun. If you can't enjoy and learn from horrendous blowouts while playing CDH, you're in for a bad time. But if you can enjoy that and learn from it, maybe more importantly, then you're gonna do fine. You'll love the meta.
Oh yeah, I think honestly, personally, in my opinion, the part of having a mature mindset about the game is being able to appreciate huge blowouts, no matter which side of them you're on.
Yeah. Exactly.
Cool. So I think we're gonna get into the actual meat and potatoes after an hour of recording. We'll get through this. We got a lot of content to get through here.
Yeah.
But yes, let's hop into talking about the main event, because there were some pretty cool rounds. So the main event the format was that there were 5 rounds on Saturday in open, and then a round of open on the Sunday into a cut to top 16, and then top 16 rounds, and then a top 4 round. So I guess we'll start by talking about day 1 first. I guess we'll get everybody's. I guess we'll just go through and just get sort of the performances of everybody and the records, and then just for giving context, and then we can sort of talk about any specific rounds and stuff like that. So Ken, on day 1, I think it's weird as well, because I think we all ended with the same record going into the cut to top 16, but we all arrived at it in very different ways.
Absolutely.
Not misremembering.
I ended day 1 2-1-2, or so 2 wins, a loss, and 2 draws.
Right. And then I believe I ended. Did I end 2-1? Oh, I ended 2-1-2, but with a bye as one of the wins, and then.
Okay. Yep.
Morgan, you ended.
I ended 3-1-1.
Yeah.
Ooh, yeah.
So coming into it hot.
Yeah, and then I guess for me, on day 2 in that last round, we all agreed to draw, because there were two people who were 3-2. So them drawing meant that they were like pretty much a lock for top 16, whereas a loss might have, left them out. And then I was thinking, depending on who wins, that could actually have me going first, though that's not super likely, but it definitely like cemented me going second in my semifinal pod. And then we were like, okay, we'll agree to the draw, we'll play the game anyways. And like, I was looking at the pod going like, this is a pretty favorable composition for me. There was a Rafine Stacks deck going first, then me, then a Turbo deck, and then I want to say Najila going last. And I was like, I actually quite like my odds in this pod, but, quite like my odds still means 50%, Yep.
Yep.
And so I just went, I'll take the draw. And then we played the game, and it wound up just being like an absolute blowout. I passed turn 3 with Thrasios Seedborn Muse and 8 mana.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, it was not okay. So, maybe I should have played it, and I would have ended 4-1-1, which I think which definitely would have put me going first in the semifinal. But like, even if I like my position in the pod, it's still like a coin toss. Yeah, and sorry, the fourth player I didn't mention. The fourth player in the pod was just completely out of it, so they went like, I don't care, right? It's not like even if they'd won, they still weren't making top 16.
Yeah.
So they went, if you guys want to draw, I'm fine to draw.
That's nice.
But yeah, I guess I should have played.
Should have taken it. So you actually you played your round on day 2, right, Ken?
Yes. I played and then won that one, and that was, yeah, it was interesting. Like, really, I kind of the notable moments, the notable Swiss games for me were the first. I won it, and I felt really confident, and the deck performed well, and I just felt comfortable, and I was sort of like, the mental game felt good. And I was like, oh, well, that's cool. You know, I was like, okay, I showed up, I played, and I won a game.
Yeah,
that's even better. You know, cool. Yeah, exactly. I'll go home and I'll be happy. Like, I didn't totally scrub out. Thumbs up. And then as the games progressed throughout the day, and I rolled into the draws and another win, I was like, well, okay. Like, near the end of the day, I was like, well, now I actually have to start, like, being, I don't know, like getting serious or something, like be an adult. Yeah, exactly. And so that 6th round, I had high hopes. You know, I thought like, okay, I even asked both of you. I remember being like, hey, what is like the math for, like, you know, making a draw happen for the 6th round? Like, do you think people will be amenable to it or not? And you know, the pod I was in, it made no sense for most of the players to draw. So I was like, okay, I get it. But yeah, winning that one in the morning, I was like, oh my god, now this is going to happen whether I like it or not.
Yeah, and just gotta play it through.
Yeah, exactly. I'll just keep playing. And but yeah, I mean, the Swiss rounds were, I would say that my sort of overwhelming impression from them, or the main thing I walked away from, was that for the most part, everybody had really good sportsmanship. Everybody was playing pretty responsibly for the most part. And I only saw a little bit of salt. And that was good. I was like, okay, I was like, man, I like this environment a lot. You know, I started to just kind of lean into the tournament expectations of it. And you know, got to meet lots of cool players and had good conversations after the game and chatted about deck choices and card selections and all that. And so it just felt like a really, really good learning experience. And then the fact that the focus on process had good results that first day, I was like, that's icing on the cake. And then day 2 became like, okay, win the thing. You know, that I woke up, or went to sleep that night, and then woke up being like, okay, now you have to go win. Yeah. And the mindset changed.
There's actually a very noticeable difference in even the atmosphere, but also, like, I think literally how everybody starts, like, feeling and starts like getting into their zone, getting into their own head a bit in second day, about just like, all right, now we're locked in, we're gonna play tight. And certainly, like, even like top 16 rounds as well, like, there's a stark difference in how table talk goes at, like, in a top 16 or top 4 versus how it goes in open rounds.
Unless you have Elder Drunken Highlander in your top 16 pod, then there's still gonna be a good amount of banter.
Oh no, sorry. There's definitely still banter in top 16 pods. It's just it becomes a lot more functional in terms of the discussions and the interactions a lot of the time. I found. Yeah, cool. I actually did want to say as well that just for the first day is that I think feature pods are actually a bad luck charm for me, because what ended up happening is, so I went 3-0 in the LCQ and got the bye, so I didn't play the first round on Saturday, and then the next 3 rounds I played all of them in the feature match area.
Oh my god.
For stream, and I went lost, draw. And as soon as I played the next round, which they finally took me out of the feature match for because my record was no longer good, obviously. As soon as they took me out and I sat down, I immediately got a game win. So I was just like, God, next time
it's those tents. Those tents, the thoughts can't go as high because you got that tent above your head.
Well, it's also I don't get to play with my own mat. I have to play with their mat and all their stuff. It's just like, all right, I guess I'll continue playing like this.
I am definitely self-conscious when I'm on stream. Luckily, like I've played in my fair share of feature matches, so I have some good habits that I've developed. But like, it's
also just
definitely
like playing on stream is like actually very good practice for playing in feature match areas, just in terms of like board clarity. And
my bad luck was different, which is I remember just being so I went last in my first round. Whatever, it happens. In my second round, I'm going last again. I'm like, great, fantastic. And then we all sit down, and the tournament had this anti-card system where like we had packs of cards that we were given, and then like you'd ante one card for each game. And I sit down in my game 2, and we started with 6, and so if you lost, you'd be down to 5. If you won, you'd pick up 3, you'd be at 9. Everyone pulls out 9 cards. I'm like, this is statistically very unlikely. Then I got paired into a pod of 4 winners.
Oh my god.
Going last.
Yeah. And so I wound up going over the 6 rounds. I wound up going first once, second once, third once, and fourth 3 times.
Oh wow.
Which was not ideal. But yeah.
Cool. So I guess that's before top 16. Any other memorable moments? I think we covered a good amount.
No, not really. I mean, they're fun little interactions and blah blah blah, but it's all pretty par for the course CDH stuff.
Actually, I think we should though. I'm not sure if you guys played in the same pod at all during the tournament. Don't think so.
No. We never
No, sadly not.
I definitely played in pods with both of you over the course of top 16, which I think we should actually probably go over a bit. That
makes sense.
I think me and you played first, or at least we were in the same pod before me and Morgan were in the same pod. Which was a fun one. It was, I believe, so it was, there was a 5-color Sisay player, you, me, and I'm forgetting the last deck that was in that pod.
Ball on,
Dawnwaker. Yes, Thresh Bruce, Dawnwaker. It was a fun pod. Basically, the entirety of the game was spent under a deafening silence. Which makes for a rough time for anybody actually trying to win the game, aside from the Sisay player, and the Sisay player could never get there. So it was just like the entire game was spent maneuvering interaction under a deafening silence, trying not to lose for the entire table.
Yeah, no, that game was fun. Anytime I have to default to lightning bolt control, I'm like, okay, sure, this game is a game.
And for the record, that game only went to a draw because I ripped a fierce off the top for the bolt at like the exact right time.
Oh, interesting. Okay, nice.
Because there was a very real they were like I think 2 Krarks and a Veyran in play, or a Harmonic Prodigy in play. So we were like actually very realistically, we were getting very close to just dying to you casting a bolt every end step once people were like out of cards. So it was a pretty huge stroke of luck for me to actually like get a counterspell for it that mattered. I was stuck not having the mana for like the entire game. But yeah, it was a good game.
But the way you played the outs in the final turn, I thought was really good. The one thing that I'll note for audience, the audience, and like particularly if anybody, if you're TOing, put a clock in your feature match area, please. That was something I did. I was so dumb. I didn't ask for time until we had like 17 minutes left, and it was like, crap.
Well, we have to actually try to play the game now, and I don't think anybody's actually going to get through to it.
Exactly, and just to be like, now I have to like try to hurry opponents along and their decision making and like blah blah blah, and it was a little unfortunate. But yeah, that just a small note, like for TOs, if you have a feature match area, just throw a clock in there, set it up so that the players have all the information that they deserve to have. But it was fun. I mean, I just felt really, super glad to meet you folks generally. That was kind of my primary goal, is like meet all these people who I admire and whose content I listen to and, who I can learn from. But also finally you get a game with you, Reed. I was like, okay, excellent. This is, like, now play, I can, dial up the learning as much as possible. And I wish, Morgan, that we had been able to sit down at a pod and play in the tournament. I know that we got games outside of it, which was a blast, but next time there will be more.
Uh-huh. Oh, we did actually, because it was interesting, because there was sort of a prelude to this game, actually, because we had played the MLC a couple of weeks before, 2 or 3 weeks before, something like that. So you sort of got a preview as to what it was like playing a tournament with me. So that
that's true. That's true. Right? I learned a little bit about the politicking, a little bit about the social patterns. But it's just so much. Play in person is so much better.
Oh yeah.
Oh my god. To me it feels like it's almost a different game.
Yeah.
So yeah, being in person was really, I was like, okay, now I get the whole picture,
Cool. And then me and Morgan also got a game in, which was it was a fun one. I'm not gonna go through the entirety of the game, but effectively what it went down to was Morgan was going first, I was going second, and then we had blue red. It was Clan Crafter and what is his name?
The guy who goads your stuff and makes treasures.
Yeah. So super weird and fun deck, and then a Winota going last. And the game starts with Morgan going land crypt green sun zenith for Hermit Druid, and we were all just this is gonna be fun. Great, yeah, perfect.
Yep.
Here's the thing: is that I was looking at that hand because the rest of my hand was I had a land, Vamp Tutor, Consult, Tainted Pact. And I was like,
oh wow.
I'm like, maybe I'm just supposed to go for like a bloom tender.
Yeah.
Because like just having that much mana, I can play I can play Thrasios and hold an activation, or like play Tymna and hold like Tainted Pact or Consult. Like that's probably like the safest play. And then literally in my hand, I was like, I'm on stream, but even if I wasn't, like, I'm going first. If turn 1 Hermit Druid into turn 2 win is ever going to work, it's now. And so I'm going for it. And then on Reed's turn 1, he git probes the Izzet player.
Yeah, and I see in his hand he has Colorland, Strip Mine, Gamble, and Passion Negation. And I'm just like, oh boy, this one's gonna be a rough answer. All right, so I don't have the answer for Hermit Druid in my opening hand, so I'm just like, well, all right, we're gonna have to try to not die to this one using something in this hand. So I think I played out. I think I also had some fast mana, but like nothing much to do with it on the first turn. I think I just like played like it was like a sword. I had like a sword and a dork. I think I played a dork. Anyway, we passed the turn over to him, and he like plays a landed, and he plays the Volk, and I'm just like, okay, no, you can't. I'm not sure that you can play the Volk yet, because there's a very real chance that we have to strip mine Morgan turn 1 so that we don't die.
Yeah.
The idea being that like he doesn't have another card, or he doesn't have another creature in play. There's only a Narcomoeba in the deck, and he needs the green to activate the Hermit Druid. So like theoretically, if you strip mine him here, he has to use the land drop to activate the Hermit Druid, and then he doesn't have an additional mana to cast the Malevolent Hermit out of the bin or cast like a Dork from hand, unless he rips exactly Elder Spirit Guide off the top. So he's like, yeah, all right, that sounds good to me. So he strip mines Morgan turn 1, and then Winota doesn't do much on turn 1 either. And then
he just played like a Lotus Petal.
Yeah.
And then on Morgan's turn, he rips the Elder Spirit Guide and has the land drop.
Oh my god.
So he goes for it. Goes, yeah, land drop, bitch. Yes, deactivate the Hermit Druid. get the Narcomoeba. Cast Malevolent Hermit, and then the Isn't player, I did see this in his hand, rip the Force of Will for turn.
Oh
Forces
my
the
god.
Malevolent Hermit, pitching the back to negation.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So
and
Morgan-
Reed had
Morgan's stuck
Reed had
with-
been like no, I think you have. I forget exactly what he said, but it was basically like, no, I think you have to use the strip mine, not the other one. So I was like, okay,
Yeah,
cool.
not the other one.
This guy had two options. One of them was strip mine, and like, given that he chose the strip mine, you know, like he had like a 1-mana counterspell and a strip mine. It was like, that's my assumption. And he played strip mine, not the 1-mana counterspell, and so I'm now home free. Because, you know, Reed effectively told me, hey, there's only one, like, there's only one piece of interaction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He plays Force of Will, and Reed and I are both just like,
God.
what?
Wait, 'cause I'm assuming you expected that I had been bluffing, and I really wasn't because I had not seen it.
Oh
Yeah.
wow.
And then it gets better because on my turn I go land drop Soaring Phantasmal Image of the Hermit Druid.
Oh great. Yep.
And
Out
then
fire fine
Ken, do you want to know how that game ended?
How?
We both activated our Hermit Druids and it went to a draw.
Oh my god.
So yeah, the Winota player on turn 2 uses his pedal to cast Archon. So now we're like, okay, well this is awkward. I literally had to memories journey in my upkeep to not die, obviously.
Yep.
And I was like, okay, I could put like Thoracle and land back. And basically what I came up with was, I think my best option was I had a counterspell, a land, and an endurance.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And so, like, that was what I put back, and then I was like, I'm just gonna try and, like, bluff Reed into thinking I have the counterspell. Reed, unbeknownst to me, had drawn his Narcomoeba, and since there was an Archon, he couldn't win by activating, because he would only have had two creatures.
Oh wow.
So then
how silly.
he like plays his commander and passes or something, and then it gets back to Winota, who slams Remorseful
Winota.
Cleric, the one that
he
exiles
slams-
Graveyard.
Yeah, perfect. Yep.
Yeah. Oh yeah, sorry.
And we're
Slams
just
the
like-
Remorseful Cleric. And now we're both the
Or-
entire game. Yeah, one of the two. Anyway, he does that, and then now we're both trying to maneuver a game with like all of our entire decks available to us via Hermit Druid, but having to maneuver around a Remorseful Cleric plus a Rule Blonde play, and I had also drawn my Endurance, so we both had Endurances for each other as well.
Wow.
So yeah, that was definitely a game.
That's pretty funny. That's good though. That's a nice little lock, you know?
Yeah, just mutually taking it to a draw because nobody can actually deal with it otherwise.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, cool. So I guess we'll move over to day 2 / top 16. So I think Ken, I think you're the best seeding out of any of us.
I was when the cut was made. I was 6th.
Yes,
And
yes.
we
So
were 7th
actually
and 8th.
7th and 8th.
Oh hell yeah!
yeah,
Look at
I
that!
was-
Look at that cluster.
I was.
Look at that cluster
and
of baddies.
the 5th place player, the other Hermit Druid player.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Celicia. Yep. Wow.
Which was great also because I didn't know whether or not I was getting 8th or 9th, which is actually a very big deal on the gap between those because the seating order in top 16 was the seating order was defined by your seed. Oh,
Yep.
So, yeah, it's a hard one to say without
Yeah.
spoiling stuff. Anyway, so 8th means you're going 2nd in your pod. 9th means you're going 3rd. So pretty huge difference. Very, very relieved to have gotten the 8th slot rather than the 9th there.
Nice.
But yeah, so I guess Ken, we'll go through your sort of your experience in top 16 before going to top 4. So you were in a pod with go for it.
I was in a pod. It was Corvold in the first seat, which we hate to see it. But we had access to the list, and this was just like the all gas no brakes Corvold.
Oh, yeah.
Barely any interaction, just all pedal to the floor. And I was like, okay, cool. So Corvold in the first seat. then me, and then Ball on Dawn Waker, and then a gentleman on Rocco. And I was like, okay, cool. I was just excited to play against the Rocco deck. And the game was something. It was weird. Basically, I kept a hand premised on the strength of heuristic study, and that premise proved itself to be true.
Right.
The heuristic study absolutely kept me alive and then won me the game. And Ball had a Draneth that was really keeping everybody nice and slow for a while. I just had a single Krark. I had managed to politic with Ball. I had bounced the Draneth, recast the Krark, pass the turn, being like, well, you can redeploy the Draneth, and that shuts off Corvold, and this is just a little thing. So he agreed to that, and that was nice. So I got Krark trigger. And then Rocco was sort of developing a board, but not doing too much. Didn't have a ton of mana. And then Corvold had a monkey that, monkeys and Tymnas just prey on the good old Krark Sakashima players for good reason, because most of the time, and I say most, not all, but most of the time, we ain't gonna block. And so Corvold was just making treasure after treasure after treasure off me, and ripping lands, which was great because it made my Rhystic draws better. But eventually got to a turn, swung in, attacked me, monkey. Monkey flips a Mind's Desire. And the Draneth is still there. But I see the Mind's Desire get flipped, and I was like, well, that's unfortunate. I sure would like to cast that spell, and I'm not gonna. And then Corvold IDs the line, Tainted Packs for Assassin's Trophy, or, finds Assassin's Trophy, stops there, and we're all going like, I'm thinking like, okay, yeah, pop the Draneth so that you can dockside Corvold, do the standard thing. But pops the Draneth, which makes I'm thrilled about it. And then starts swinging wheels, starts doing stormy stuff, building up mana, and then goes to cast my Mind's Desire, and off the monkey.
Right.
And I was like, oh, I see, because they controlled a Stormkiln artist, and so did I. So I was like,
yeah,
I get it.
Yep.
This is just a very expedient route to generate enough mana that when you resolve your Corvold, then you're good to go, because you'll have so much treasure to crack.
Yeah.
And don't even really need dockside at that point. So they went for it that way, and I had to politic extremely hard. I had to push Ball and the other gentleman who was on Rocco to feed me. I was like, I'm the only out right now. Like they didn't have interaction. I was like, I had a Fierce in my bin. I kind of intuited when a dockside had come down, and Rocco had a ton of mana from their dockside. They cracked them all. I think they cracked eight treasures for all green. And I was like, okay, well, endurance, maybe there's a Noxious Revival, hopefully, whatever. And sure enough, they're like, I have a Noxious. I was like, cool, you need to Noxious my Fierce back, and then you need to feed my Rhystic so that I can draw it and stop Corvold's nonsense. And they agreed. They're like, yes, that's the only out. We see it. We agree. But then they went back and forth, the two players, and they're like, how much do we feed? How much do we feed him? Should we feed him one extra card? And it was this big convoluted conversation about feeding me one extra card. And I was fighting tooth and nail to be like, yes, you do feed me one extra card here, because Fierce might not do it. And I am the only out. Y'all are going to lose unless I play control. So please, God, just feed me with one more card, right? What's it going to do? And so they did. They wound up doing that. Rocco sort of frustratingly enduranced his own graveyard, not the Corvold's players, which I was a little upset about, but it was okay. I was like, fine, whatever. But I got my Fierce back, and I managed to Fierce something that mattered at the time. And then Corvold, they are in this weird spot where they have enough treasure off dockside to perform the loop with Teamer, but draw me a card each time. They can't do it scot-free. So they Mind's Desire eventually flips a Pyroblast. And so I was like, okay. I was just thinking, and a bunch of other stuff, including an LED.
Right.
And I was like, okay, I'm really, really hoping that they don't Pyroblast the Rhystic immediately.
Yeah.
Right? That would be the smartest thing. I'm really, really hoping they don't. And Sandwich, the player, didn't. I was like, okay, this is great. But he was paying for Ristic because he had tons of mana. And I was like, oh fuck, okay, well, I hope I get something, because I still was drawing dead. The Fierce was gone. I had a hell of a hand for my turn. I had a packed upkeep trigger, but I had Krark and Stormkiln, and I think at that point I had four treasures. I had cracked down to 4. And I was like, well, if I draw some free interaction, maybe Stormkiln will bounce it. Krark will bounce it to hand a few times. Stormkiln will generate me enough mana to pay for Pact and then just go for it. Otherwise, I was just going to pay for Pact and probably just pass, maybe develop a piece or something.
Right.
And Korvold cast LED, did not pay for Ristic. And I responded, held priority, responded with Pyroblast targeting Ristic, paying. I was like, oh no, not paying. I was like, okay, cool, I've got 2 draws. I drew Mindbreak Trap. And it was the perfect draw.
Yep.
It was the best out. I was in Dockside was still on the stack, I think. Yeah, no, this is actually when Dockside was on the stack. The LED had drawn me another card, which got me closer to the Mindbreak Trap. But so Dockside was on the stack and a Pyroblast. Dockside for the loop, and we knew the hand. The player had to crack their LED because of the Mind's Desire pile. So we knew the hand. We had totally perfect information. Mindbreak Trap was able to hit the Dockside, hit the Pyroblast, protect the Ristic. Their turn was done. They just basically fizzled. And then because of Mindbreak Trap, I cast, I think, 3 or 4 times, and I kept bouncing. And so I was able to untap, pay for Pact, go over the top, and then do Krark stuff. But it was a really wild game, and and really the extremely, me just talking exhaustingly at these 2 players and just being like, please, right?
Yeah.
One more card. What, I do have the pack trigger, and yes, I could draw free interaction and make a ton of treasures, whatever, but you do have to not lose in order to win. So 1 card maybe. And that's what got me there, That's I drew Mindbreak Trap was the last card I drew off that entire chain of stuff from the Ristic, and that's what saved my skin. So it was very, very lucky. And I was super happy to see somebody take my Mind's Desire and go for a win. That was fun and exciting to watch. And
Yeah, definitely.
so yeah, it was a wild game, and I felt super like just luck sacked into and out, and then just performed the regular Storm stuff.
Play to the outs, and then you hit them, right? Like sometimes you hit the out.
Yeah.
You play to
I guess
it.
that's
Otherwise, like
I guess that's true. I was always doing that, and it did pay off. So it was a really fun game, and I think everybody felt. The Korvold player was kind of cursing themselves for a couple misplays in that last turn, but they were in a really tight position. They had enough resources, but everything was just a little bit awkward.
Right.
A little bit mana short, a little bit awkward. So they didn't just have like a super open lane, and so they I think were beating themselves up a little bit, but I think they played really, really well, and they saw a cool line that I did not see until they popped the Drannith, which was very fun.
Yeah, and it's definitely it gets harder to play, especially like Korvold style lines like that. I feel like it gets harder to play those in top 16, especially if you're not necessarily super experienced in playing in tournaments, especially not real life tournaments like this, where there are definitely a bunch of ways that you can mess it up or just miss something, especially if you haven't there are a lot of lines with those decks where you're not guaranteed to have seen that situation before when it happens in the game, right? Like there's just so many permutations of how the combos with those styles of decks works that it's just like, you just never know. You just have to hope that you can think through it on the fly.
Yeah, and I credit where credit's due. Like Sandwich, when I flipped Mind's Desire, they didn't immediately recognize it. They picked it up and read it. And I was like, yeah, you got a Stormkiln artist, that seems pretty cool. But I was just like, well, whatever, you're just going to Korvold and Dockside, and, you don't need that. But it turned out they did need it. Like, this was a more expedient way to generate a ton of mana, and reading the card explains the card, and they sure did read it, and it worked out. I mean, their line was really fun, and they nearly had it.
Cool. I think we can cover, I guess, ours quickly.
Yeah, please do.
Morgan,
can we cover yours quickly?
No, I just do it quick, yes.
So my pod was going first was Blue Farm, going second was me, going third was Josh on Teamer Pirates, and going last was Yisan. My pod between us kept a total of 19 cards, which is such a low number that in my head I went like, oh yeah, 19 out of 21. That's normal. And then I was like, wait a minute. There are supposed to be 28, not 21. So yeah, it was 4, like Blue Farm on 4, I was on 6, Teamer Malcolm on 4, Yisan on 5. And I look at my hand, I don't have a dork, which sucks, but I have, my plan is, okay, turn 2, I'm gonna play this Collectoroof, and I'm gonna laugh at, you know, Blue Farm, who's just mulliganed to 5 at the time I'm making this decision, and Teamer Pirates. And then Yisan's gonna go turn 1 land dork, turn 2 Yisan, and then on turn 3 I'm gonna untap it, I'm gonna Gilded Drake the Yisan. And
nice.
I kept a Tainted Pact, so cool. I could just go turn, like, Yisan on 1, get a dork, Yisan on 2, get Thoracle, win the game. Awesome. Yeah. We've got a plan. And everyone has a plan until they get turn 1 windfalled.
On the play.
Yeah, turn 1 on the play. Yep. So we're now playing a different game. My hand had, it was Hermit Druid, and then just the wonkiest set of interactive spells. Force, Memory's Journey, Mindbreak Trap, and March of Swirling Mist.
Oh wow, sure, yeah.
And I was like, I didn't want to let go of either the Mindbreak Trap or the March of Swirling Mist, so when I played my Hermit Druid and it got forced, I was like, okay, if I'm forcing back, I'm pitching Memory's Journey, and if I've spent my force in my Memory's Journey, then having this Hermit Druid is not particularly valuable to me.
Nearly as good.
So I'm just letting this get countered, and then I used my force to counter the Crom from Tim to Crom, because they spent a pedal to cast it. They didn't have more red, and I was like, no one has anything going on. And like, this Crom is gonna draw cards from being a Crom, plus draw cards from the Timna that's in play, so just no thanks. And then basically the rest of the game was spent trying to keep Yisan off the board, and I got to the mana to overload a Cycrift, like, literally just too late. He had his Yeva, and so he was flashing stuff in the end step, and he spent basically all of his mana, except he had Cradle and Nykthos and a Magus of the Candelabra. Oh, wow. And I was like, okay, he's going to Query and Ranger his Magus of the Candelabra. I'm going to overload Cycrift in response. And then he's not going to have the mana to redeploy everything. And then he just didn't. Like, he just went, cool, I'm just going to go to my turn with what I have in play. And I was like, well, that sucks. And then he drew Summoner's Pact and found Ashaya, and I was like, if Ashaya resolves, the Cycrift is useless because everything is a land, so I guess we're overloading it now and hoping he can't assemble a win under, like, you know, set himself up to win, and he could. Nice. Although someone pointed out that he was, like, kind of not doing anything, and then someone made a comment about Yisan being summoning sick, and he'd flashed it into the end step. And someone's like, it's not summoning sick, and he was like, oh, right, and then just did Yisan things, and I was like, what? Really?
Wow.
Yeah, it just feels so bad.
Free real estate.
But yeah, like, it was a good game. It was a very fun game. But it was just a little unfortunate because I had the Cycrift for a while, and like, I used the Mindbreak Trap to counter, I forget what I countered, but it was like something that I was like, that's gonna kill us extremely quickly.
Yep.
And then maybe I think it was Finale for Muse. I was like, yeah, no, absolutely not.
Yep.
It was either gonna be for Muse or Ashaya. I'm like, yeah, no. And then I'd used the March to bias a turn when he tried to untap his Magus before, because other people kept bouncing the Yisan. And then I was like, I was just like, a land, please, a land, and it was like a turn cycle of, you know, like, I activated Thrasios 2 or 3 times. I was like, just a land, please.
Whoa.
And I found it. I found it just too late.
Yep.
And so yeah, Yasan won, which I guess you know because you were in the final table.
Yeah, that's true.
I won't get all the way into top 16 for me because it's a discussion spanning probably more than we have time in this episode. But we ended up, due to an extremely extenuating set of circumstances, ended up intentionally drawing the first game in semifinals, and because you require a winner in top 16 single elimination, we had to play another game, which unfortunately ended up losing. Didn't make the correct read on the out would have been to deadly rollick the onboard Thoracle in response to somebody casting a phantasmal image on turn 3 with no prior setup. while there were also 2 Chroms and an Esper Sentinel in play.
Wow.
My
My
assumption was, well, if this is going for the Thoracle, I need to kill the Thoracle, but if it's not, I am really gonna need this Rollick for one of these Chroms at one point. Well, one of them was mine, but for the other Chrom at one point, and presumably that Fimage was also going to be a Chrom. So I was like, well, I'm gonna need this Rollick if this isn't the Thoracle, so gotta take the I guess the risk, I'd say, but didn't end up turning out. So,
Also, you'd done enough damage by single-handedly ruining CEDH tournaments for the rest of time, right?
Just
so we won't get into this episode's going a little long already. We won't get into the draw, but we'll link. Joking, the tournament organizer has a pretty lengthy section about it in his tournament report. And then I wrote a Reddit post on sort of like basically laying out like what I think the worst case scenario that this precedent could enable is. And there's lots of good discussion there. So we'll make sure to link both of those.
Yeah, those will be in the description for the episode.
It's quite possible we'll wind up talking about it on another episode or in another context. Just not now.
Yeah, and I'll just say too for the audience, like, you should, if you are interested in tournament CDH and its future, you should read these conversations and you should look up what happened and look at the consequences and look at Monarch's policy. Like, it's an important event, and the conversation, thinking through it, I think is very, very relevant for anybody interested in tournament CDH. So definitely give it a read.
Cool. But having moved past all of that, Ken, we did not make it to top 4. You did, so you have the floor.
Sure. The final table, the really nice thing is a wonderful YouTube channel who I'm going to look up just to make sure I get their name right while I do this. They recorded the game. They got the audio, and they put out an edited version of the final match on YouTube, and they also put out an unedited version, and which is fantastic, and I'm super happy that they're able to do that. And you can get a sense of sort of the play patterns of the game and the kind of core moments, but kind of the long and short of it in my mind is that I drew a really, really good hand. I was on the play. I was in the first seat, and my hand wasn't the fastest in the world, but it had everything. It had mana production, a ritual, interaction, draw, and a stable start. And I was like, well, okay. So I was, in the finals against, I was in the first seat, second seat was Najila, third seat was Timna Sakashima, kind of mid-range, fourth seat, and the Najila is the kind of standard Nas Najila, and then fourth seat was Isan. And so mulliganing, I was like, okay, yes, like I had to make I had to guess about an early Draneth from Timna Sakashima, or for that matter from Najila, but I was like, I'm just gonna bet that they are not that they don't have it. They don't have a turn 1 Draneth, and that I'll be able to develop before that. And then I also was like, well, Oof could be rough, but I'm just gonna take the risk and hopefully hold on to this ritual and slow roll it, and then I can make mana that way. And both the Timna Sakashima player and Isan, both of whom were, in control of those potential threats, they just got stuck on mana.
Yeah.
And so they had to warp their play patterns around that. Temna Sakashima got stuck on a land and a Mox Diamond. They cast a Douthie, and which I didn't really mind, and because Breach is a very, 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 very backup plan for me. And Isan, they had a Trinisphere in hand, but they were so stuck on mana, and one of their pieces was a Chrome Mox. So they were kind of priced out of casting the Trinisphere to try to slow me down. They Worldly Tutored EOT on before they untapped on turn 2. They had a Gemstone Caverns, but before they untapped on turn 2 for Birds of Paradise. And I was like, okay, we're good. We're set.
Yeah, at the time.
The runway is clear. And I found that YouTube channel, by the way. It's the Commander's House.
There you go.
It's a Spanish channel. It's fantastic, and you can find both edited and unedited versions of this final game. The long and short of it is that the final turn, which was mine, lasted a long time. My estimation of how much time was eaten up by opponents deliberating about what to do and how to adequately combat what I was up to. I think it was about 70% of the hour-long turn was them deliberating and holding priority and interacting and deciding when to interact. One of the players, the Temna Sakashima player, had never played against Kark Sakashima.
Yeah,
which I was
sorry, I don't,
very grateful for.
Yeah, I don't want to step on your toes a bit too much here, but I think the game was truly an almost perfect demonstration of how Kark Sakashima functions into tables that don't really have a whole lot of experience in interacting with it and understanding the interaction points with it. And how well Kark Sakashima can take advantage of those tables when there's not even a lot of the time if there's one vocal person at the table that knows how to play against the deck, you'll sort of get a dissemination of information during the winning turn to the rest of the table that'll sort of up that amount. I'm not sure that happened at all in that pod.
It didn't.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd say the Yisan player was the most vocal, and the most sort of thoughtful about things, but the Najeela player also, their hand priced them into clamming up because they had everything.
Right.
They had everything. They had a Silence, they had a Consult, they had a Vamp Tutor, they had Derevi. They had everything they needed to and they had more interaction. They had everything they needed to protect themselves and to set up multiple wins. And so I think that they were kind of quiet, hoping that they would draw out all the possible interaction from Temna Sakashima and Isan. Isan didn't have any interaction. Temna Sakashima with the Douthie had some interaction
but
in hand.
Somebody else to also feed into the Douthie to do stuff there.
Yes, exactly. So required other people to expend resources, and so it was, I started putting 2 Kark triggers on the stack, and I made sure the moment the game started to be very, very conscious about how I presented what I was doing to the table. So when I put a Rite of Flame on the stack for the first time, and by the way, the first 2 turns where I tried to win off, nothing happened. Kark said no.
Yep.
So
I think you ripped on
the first turn.
2 triggers on that first turn.
Yeah.
Or was it 3?
Well, I tried to Rite a Flame twice and failed, and then at an EOT I tried to consider and failed. So there were three losing Kark flips in a row, and then I could have gone for it turn 3, but Kark said no, and then turn 4 things started to work out for me. But basically there was a silence. I think ultimately there was a mistimed silence that could have saved the game. And it just got thrown out a little too late. But again, my rhetorical presentation of what I was doing was very clear, and I think those early lost flips helped, because when you don't know the deck extensively and you play against it and you see somebody spend 3 mana to do nothing, suddenly it seems like, okay, maybe this isn't the end-all be-all, right?
It's sort of like pre-preps your threat assessment to be lower.
Yes.
When you see it fail a couple of times, and especially in the same game, over the course of multiple games, maybe you saw it not do something in the first game and then play it against it in the second game. Maybe you have time to evaluate. Okay, that's probably not what the deck's designed to do. But in the same game, it can be sort of difficult to detach what immediately just happened from the theoretical threat of what could happen.
Exactly. And but when I put that first ride on the Flame on the Stack, I just was like, okay, let's see if Kark lets me make some mana. When I put the first Consider on the stack, I said, all right, I'm going to see if Kark lets me have a thought. I was trying to just be very casual and downplay the fact that, I have mana and I have card draw and I have a Tavern Scoundrel. I have everything I need, but I was like, I really wanted to emphasize that, it's not in my hands, right? It's not like I just do what I want. Yeah. We're going to see, and I was trying to be as casual as possible, and I think that really helped. The casual tone helped a lot. And then by the time I was putting 2 and then 4 triggers on the stack and, finding card draw off card draw, making mana, making treasures, blah, blah, blah. I wound up fighting through on the turn a Silence, a Dovin's Veto, 2 Abrupt Decays, and a Concerted Defense, and sailed through it. Yep. It really, that game I felt very lucky. I drew a really nice hand. I was drawing live cards. The Kark flips after those first 3 were really beautiful, back to hand and copy, and everything worked out in my favor. And I think that the opponents, they deliberated a ton and they talked a lot, but they didn't wind up making the best decisions. And I benefited from that disparity between maybe an intimate knowledge of the deck, and then I just was luckier and I was on the play, and Najila had to expend all their interaction. And I also was able to, I think, I don't know. There came a point where they just had to burn the second Abrupt Decay to do something. But I was like, I'm telling you, there is a Drevi coming. So if you spend everything on me, Drevi, Najila untaps and wins. Just letting y'all know, I'm pretty confident about that. And then yes, Najila had a Drevi after I found that out off a Git probe chain. Yep. But it was a good game. It wound up, everything kind of worked in my favor. I was on the play. I had a great opener, and I made, I think, a couple of correct assumptions about what the players were going to mulligan towards. And then after that, it was really just play tight, play a social game from the beginning. Yep. And then just hope that it works. And it did.
Yeah, hey, you put yourself in the winning position, and you pulled the win out because again, you just sort of, maybe it's a toxic term, but I think you just sort of better played the top 16 for the most part, in terms of just having a really good lock on what you were doing, have a really good lock on what the rest of the table was up to, and sort of the pain points that you could push past and try to get past with specifically some table talks and politics, and also just good sequencing, right?
Yeah, I definitely felt good. I felt like the social game was good. And the whole tournament, too, I think, just did a great job of just preparing me to be like, okay, the social game, political game begins immediately. Yep. The second after you introduce yourself and say, nice to meet you, and be nice, that's the game begins, before you see a single magic card. And that helped me win the Korvold game, when I was drawing off Ristic, and Korvold was deliberating back and forth a few times to pay for it, not pay for it. I had my head in my hands, elbows on the table, pile of cards of my hand just face down, sideways. I draw a card, look at it, throw it on top of the pile. I just was really trying to exhibit, I am drawing dead, keep going, you've got it. Yep. And I was able to, again, I drew a Mindbreak Trap, and I didn't panic, I didn't pick up my hand, I just drew it, looked at it like it was a land, put it on the pile, waited. All of this stuff, all the body language stuff, everything you say, how you comport yourself, it all adds up. And by the way, it's the only thing you can control anyway, oh yeah. I did well in that I think I played tightly and I did well in the social game, but that's all I can do, and then the draws, that's it. Okay, the deck will tell me whether or not all of that is going to be matched by good luck, but I like to just focus on what I can control and then kind of ride the wave after that. And it was great. And then I went home with a Time Twister, which I did not expect to go home with. And that was
great,
cool.
Unexpected boon. Yeah,
yes, exactly.
Just walk home with an extra $8,000. Sure.
Yeah. It was great. And I felt good about the last game too. Everybody afterward, everybody was super cordial and respectful, and I think everybody, it was a hard-fought game. Everybody felt like they could do something. Yep. And we walked away all smiling. And the first thing that happened after shaking hands and whatever, I was like, I looked at every player and I was like, that was a good game. Thank you for it. And y'all we made the top 4.
Yep.
That's huge. And so I hope that y'all feel really good about your performance. Congratulations. It was an honor to play with you, whatever. I never want people to, in a top heavy tournament like that, I do not want my opponents to feel bad. They did an incredible job.
Oh, yeah.
And should be,
actually,
praised for that, and should feel good about it.
Very impressive considering, I was talking to Morgan about this, on the day, when top 16, when we were sort of getting around to the time that top 16 cut was being announced, that that top 16 was very name heavy in terms of there were a lot of people in that top 16 who were established personalities and people who have done well in tournaments before and stuff like that. And the fact that the 3 of the people in the pod were effectively, I would say, unknown to the wider CDH sphere for the most part.
Sure.
Was just huge, right? Just goes to show that on a good day with good play, you can get super far.
Exactly. Yeah. And I could see it, playing against them. I was like, yep, I get it. It's not, you can't ride that, you can ride luck to wins plenty, but you can't do it through an entire 8-round tournament. And they were all obviously tight players, thoughtful, serious, focused, and it showed. So it was good. I felt in good company. Then I had something to think about fondly while I was trapped in Heathrow Airport again.
Yeah. I think. Oh God, we're running long. I did want to talk quickly though about just sort of for anybody listening for the future. We always try to teach lessons to some degree on the podcast. Maybe not as directly as this, but I think there are some interesting points to be made just in terms of if you find yourself in a similar situation. Jesus, I can't. Okay, if you find yourself in a similar situation to Ken's opponents in that final pod, I think some of the big things to take away from that in terms of I think Threat Assess and Kark are probably. I would say there were 2 key things. You can correct me if you think there are more or fewer, but I think. Realistically, I think potentially there probably should have been alarm bells set off when you cast Rite of Flame twice and then also cast a Consider. Seeing a correct player's hand with both acceleration and card draw in it is pretty huge. Those are basically exactly what they're looking for for any given hand. So I think probably the Consider probably should have set off alarm bells, although it might have been a bit too late at that point. And then I think definitely. If the correct player has been trying to resolve a Rite of Flame for whatever, 4 mana over 2 turns, there's probably something they want to do with it. Right. So maybe consider interacting at the point where they have the copies on the stack, if that's the earliest time that you can do so, or removing Krark, or maybe countering the Rite of Flames, or in this situation, it probably would have been the Silence. But just in that area, maybe I think Threat Assess and Krark is a pretty difficult task, especially if you haven't played against it a whole lot, and don't really have a whole lot of experience with its play patterns. But it's something to consider is just when they're casting spells and they're losing the flips, you might want to consider why they're casting those spells and what they want out of it.
Absolutely. And earlier, interacting earlier rather than later is always a good rule of thumb against Kark Sakashima.
Yep.
And, I think that if it's not always just wait for Sakashima to be on the stack and then pop the Kark and then rest on my laurels and play the other 2 decks, not bearing in mind that a 2-drop commander and a 4-drop commander, they can be recast, It's fine. It's all good. And it happens plenty, games do grind on. And so never thinking that one piece of prevention is worth, an ounce of cure or whatever. You need to prevent and then also continue to pay attention to the deck, because the engine is in the command zone. So it is always available. And, Dockside Extortionist does exist.
Yep.
And so interact early, remove Krark, remove the enablers if you can't remove Krark, or if you're, for some reason, if you think that you can't force through Krark or whatever. remove the enablers. Like the fact that I had Krark, a Tavern Scoundrel, and then exactly as you said, I showed card draw and a ritual. That should have sent the table on like, okay, stop that. You know, like full board, stop that. Yes, like there's everything there. And for those curious too about how to beat the deck and play it, if you're curious, like I made a whole video about it. Like I literally talk for like 15 minutes in a video, like here's how you beat this deck. So you can just look up on YouTube how to play Krark well, and the back half of that video is me just explaining here are like 5 rules of thumb, pun intended, that you can adopt to help you, you know, combat the deck consistently. Like it's yes, it is complicated. Yes, it's a psychological stacks deck because it does all sorts of stuff with the stack that is hard to visualize and remember and blah blah blah, and the timing is tough. But it's just a Magic deck at the end of the day. It's not some complicated, you know, rocket machine thing. So just you know, keep in mind you can study it, you can learn it, you can beat it, and if they've got everything in hand, throw what you got against it, because it is a hard to interact with engine, maybe arguably harder to interact with engine than Thrasios Seedborn, and it's in the command zone already. You know, we don't have to tutor Seedborn Muse, so it's like I want people to think about it in those terms. Like it's an always available engine that is very, very good, if not the best engine at protecting itself. So just prevent the engine. You know, stop it, and then you'll probably be okay.
And I will say, I think it's also stronger than Thrasios Seedborn Muse, just because none of the pieces of it are gilded drinkable profitably.
Exactly.
It's like gilded drinking Cody. It's just like, I really don't want to do this.
Exactly. It's like, okay, yes, you can take my Krark and then not resolve your counter spells, or you could take my 5-cent Tavern Scoundrel and sacrifice a permanent with it. Congratulations, like,
hey,
mazel tov with that
one.
I
play a deck with a Tavern Scoundrel in it.
That's awesome.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do.
Yeah, cool. And yeah, I will say, I think one of the marks of a player who is very confident in their deck and their skills and the deck and the ability for the deck they play to continue performing is like a high willingness to expose to the community at large how you beat it, because if that shows confidence in that even if you know that people at the table know how to beat the deck, that you're still going to be able to take games off of them, which is exactly where you should be.
That's where I want to be. I want to play the best games possible. You know, that's why I play CDH. I don't want to win on gotchas. I want to win because I had to fight really hard and I played tighter and or got luckier than everybody. So,
well, congrats again.
Thank you.
Thank
you so much.
I think we got through pretty much all the stuff we wanted to talk about in terms of Tier1Con and our main topic, which does in fact clear the way for everybody's favorite segment. Gotcha!
Gotcha.
Yeah, there you go. I think so. Ken, if you haven't listened to the podcast before, which I don't blame you if not, because it's usually
I have listened to the podcast before, indeed.
Good to know. For any viewers, we're gonna ask a quick question and try to get a minimum of deliberation before getting some answers out, and just see what everybody thinks about it. So Morgan, I think you have a gut check prepared.
Yeah, I do. Unfortunately, it's not going to make a terribly good poll, but
gotcha
the breaks. So it's sorry. If you could change one thing that you did at Tier1Con, what would it be? And it could be card choices, gameplay choices, or even something external to the event.
Who's the answer first?
I got one. You got one. We'll let Ken go first, I think.
Okay.
Guess first.
But this is simple. I would have packed better food.
Oh, yep. There was pretty much exactly a breakfast at the hotel and then a Circle K.
Yep. It was like expensive, bad sandwiches. But no, I wished I had packed better and smarter food-wise. Because, it is, man, nothing drains calories like playing Magic for hours and hours and hours. So eat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and unfortunately, particularly on day one, a lot of the lunch break was eaten up because one of the rounds went super long and just didn't quite wasn't necessarily the easiest to go get like a good proper meal.
I think probably what I would change is getting there a day earlier because in the 2 years collective, like I guess like week and a half that we have been in Copenhagen over the past this year and last year, we got to see the downtown core for like a grand total of probably 3/4 of a day. So
Yep.
so I think definitely get there another day early and maybe have a Thursday as an exploration day and
Smart.
yeah, maybe Friday
Smart.
also.
Yep.
Honestly, that Reed's answer isn't bad, because really what I wished was just that I had gotten more sleep, and I don't know exactly what I needed to do, because I was just I was waking up super early, and I don't know why. But yeah, I definitely like was feeling like kind of tired, and I think, you know, it influenced some of my decisions. I don't think it wound up having a huge outcome, like effect on the outcome, but definitely just I wasn't in the headspace I wanted to be in.
Great, cool. That is our gut check, and I think we have probably produced enough content for this episode. We're running at about the 2-hour mark in terms of recordings right now, so I think we're gonna go through and close this one out. Before we go through the whole spiel again, Ken, anything that you want to shill, any links, such, where can we find you again?
Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, thank you for having me. It's a great honor.
Anytime.
Like, y'all, I said this to y'all in person, but I'll say it again now because you should hear it more. I look up to y'all immensely as players, as brewers, and so just being able to hang out, meet in person, play games, talk about the tournament, and you're thinking about it was super instructive for me. So I'm just very gracious for y'all's presence in the community, and I'm very gracious to be a part of this podcast, which is, I think, a very central pillar of sort of the pedagogical thing that we all do, which is, you know, try to help each other
Incredibly
play good
kind.
games. Well, it's true. I mean, you know, I'm lucky because it's also true. So, but you can find more info about me at kenbaumann.com. You can find info about my Krark stuff, my cdh.guide work, my books, and my strange past lives. And you'll know what that means when you go to kenbaumann.com. And that's it. Yeah, thank you for having me. Thank you for blabbing so long with me. And again, I really appreciate being able to hop on the podcast. So please continue.
Oh yeah, anytime. And you can find all those links in the description. We'll have those there. But I think that does about wrap it up for this episode. If you'd like to reach out to us with any questions, comments, or concerns, you can contact us on Twitter at IntoTheNorthPod, via our email at IntoTheNorthPodcast@gmail.com, or on our Discord server, the invite link for which can be found in the description for this episode. An extra special thanks goes to all of our patrons who help cover the expenses for our show and allow us to work toward improving the quality of the podcast. If you too would like to become a patron, we're at patreon.com/IntoTheNorthPodcast. Another way you can support us is via our TCG Player affiliate link. Anytime you want to purchase something from TCG Player, if you use our affiliate link, which is in the podcast and YouTube description, a portion of your purchase goes towards supporting the podcast. Thank you, as always, to the band Vox Cadre for our lovely podcast music, to Nate Slubber for our equally lovely podcast logo. You can never not fumble that one. Next episode will be out in 2 weeks. Until then, see ya.
Have a good one.
Bye.